Game ain't over. The sun is shining. And it ain't over.
You wanted the best, you got the best from my home studio on Long Island, New York. Welcome to Ian Scotto Rocks. I am your host, Ian Scotto. Now, I've been watching and listening to the Joe Rogan Experience for many, many years. I'm not someone who's checking out every single episode. He's definitely had some questionable guests on recent episodes. I'll put it that way. But when he has someone on that I like, a great comedian like Big Jay Oakerson, I'll check it out. And so I was listening to that episode, which just dropped a few days ago from when you're seeing this, if you're seeing when this episode of Ian Scotto Rocks is out on YouTube. And Big Jay Oakerson asked something that Joe didn't really answer, but I have more of an answer to. So, yeah, let's get right into it here. And I'm going to see what you guys think of this.
That's part of the package. You want brilliant, fucking wild music, you got to get a dude who's out of his fucking mind.
Do you have any theories on why people can't, like classic, amazing bands can't make a classic again? Comedians can still write their best joke,
right?
And it will be accepted. Mm-hmm. Everyone's looking for that. What's the new thing? But like, if Guns N' Roses got everybody back together again and sat in a room for 3 months, they can't make Welcome to the Jungle again.
They're not the same guys. You know, that's part of the problem. And then also,
which he does answer that much, where he says they're not the same guys, but that was his only answer, and I think there's more to it. So if it's a comedy question, Joe will nerd out for a while because Joe is a student of comedy. That's how he is. He's not a student of music the way I am, right? He's not someone who nerds out about this stuff and does all these deep dives like I do. And it's evident, right? If you listen to whenever a great musician is on the Joe Rogan Experience, oftentimes I could tell you, I'm like, geez, why doesn't he ask him about this or that? Why is he asking him about like the vaccine? I want to hear about when they were in the studio making this album or that album. And no episode is more evident of that than when he had Joe Perry on. If you guys remember that was way back on the podcast. But I remember this was embarrassing because of all songs, this is what he did. He's like, he doesn't mention any other song by Aerosmith, I think, the entire episode. And he says to Joe, like, maybe he mentions Walk This Way, but he says to Joe, he's like, yeah, when I was into wrestling and I would walk out and get pumped, man, I would listen to Lightning Strikes by you guys. And Joe Perry's like, yeah, that's the one album I didn't play on. Which is just so, I'm like, Joe, you could have looked that up before you went on the podcast with, you know, the legendary Joe Perry. But anyway, I'm going to give my take on this. Part of that is the answer. They're not the same guys. And that is a big part of it. I think that they mentioned Welcome to the Jungle, right? And all of those classic 80s bands, whether it's Motley Crue or Guns N' Roses or even the people on the tier below that in terms of popularity like Faster Pussycat, like, it was a dangerous time, man. They moved out from their hometown to live on the Sunset Strip, and it was all about, quite honestly, getting wasted, experimenting with drugs, fucking every girl that you saw in the scene, and writing songs about that lifestyle. If you're doing that in your 40s and 50s, it's kind of embarrassing at that point, right? Like, that's not the lifestyle you want to be living. So if that's what you're writing about and you're not really living that, then that's kind of phony. I don't think you can write a song like Rocket Queen or Welcome to the Jungle, the current version of those guys now, because that's not who they are. Like, Slash going through his divorces and being parents and like just living a completely different lifestyle. And also they were broke and trying to make it, and now they're all multimillionaires. So that changes a lot of things. You know, I remember working with Dee Snider from Twisted Sister, and he spoke about how he struggled to write anything meaningful after Stay Hungry, because he's like, what am I rebelling against? I'm here in my jacuzzi in my beautiful home. I don't have anything to be angry about. And I think that becomes a problem for some guys. And so, yeah, you want to write music that's authentic to you in that time period. And I think with comedy, that's more accepted. Like when Chris Rock puts out a new comedy special, because I consider Chris Rock probably the greatest comedian, or definitely one of the greatest. Like, I would definitely put him on levels above Joe Rogan personally as a comedian. I'm not trying to see him do bigger and blacker again. And he's evolving what he speaks about. I mean, I remember a few stand-up specials ago, it wasn't the last one, but where Chris Rock talked about getting divorced, and he goes, I got addicted to porno. And the whole crowd laughs. And he goes, yeah, I know, multi-billion-dollar industry, but I'm the only one who has an addiction problem with this. And, like, it was a very real moment. And I think that's what people like. Like, you can make comedy out of these very real things that you're experiencing in your life. And with music, it's a little bit more, all right, I want to return back to this time. So if you're listening to Limp Bizkit, you want a certain experience. Or if you listen to Guns N' Roses, you want a certain experience. And that's why I think a lot of people didn't accept Chinese Democracy when it came out. I personally love the album. You know, outside of rock, I'm a huge fan of Bone Thugs and Harmony. And like, a lot of it was glorifying crime and violence and the city that they grew up in Cleveland. And if you listen to, like, more new music from the members of Bone Thugs and Harmony, like Crazy Bone has put out albums about, like, sin and trying to stay away from that lifestyle and conquering the devil and conquering your demons. It's kind of the polar opposite of what they were glorifying 20 years ago, but that's the man that he is today. He's no longer this teenager who's glorifying a lifestyle that he no longer believes in. So it would be so phony to say, go back to what you were doing 20 years ago. Now, there are bands that I think are putting out bona fide classics, and they are being true to themselves right now. Like, I think LA Guns, when they put out The Missing Piece, which was, it was a few years ago, but right many, many years after the heyday, and they reunited with Phil Lewis and Tracy Guns, that is as good as anything LA Guns has put out. The problem is that the audience for the mass appeal is just not there right now. But I think if you're someone who loves Welcome to the Jungle and that type of music, I would highly, highly recommend that you put on The Missing Piece by LA Guns. They've put out great albums since then, but that one, to me, was just like, holy shit, I can't believe they did this. So you may have to dig a little deeper. It may be the bands that aren't on that A-list tier. And as for Guns N' Roses, I don't know if we'll ever see any really new material. They're remaking songs that they did from a few years back with the newer guys. I don't think they're recording together in a recording studio. I think the only time those guys are hanging out, if you want to call it hanging out, is when they get on stage and perform, because I think they want to keep the conflict to a minimum, and they don't want those old wounds to reopen, so that they can keep this thing going for the money and, you know, for the fans, if you want to believe that. But are Slash and Axl hanging out? No. And I don't believe they want to get together in a studio for 12 hours a day and write the best material of their lives. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. And if they did, I think it would be a shadow of what they were previously putting out. You know, so maybe they shouldn't put out new material, because it's probably not going to be on the level of Use Your Illusions or Appetite for Destruction, and that's why I think they're shying away from doing that. But there are bands doing it. Sebastian Bach's last album was an absolute classic, Child Within the Man. So I think if you're a fan of that genre, there still is stuff being put out. You may just need to dig a little bit. Dokken's last album, was it a bona fide classic? No, but I really thought they did a good job on When Heaven Comes Down. And it's not the classic lineup, but Don is still doing stuff within a vocal range that he's comfortable with. So I think the bottom line is you're not going to hear that stuff on the radio if it comes out and it's great. But yeah, just listen to old bands that you grew up with, and you may discover some stuff that you really like. Like, I think if more people put on that last Sebastian Bach and listen to those scorching guitar solos on there and him still hitting these high notes, they'd be like, holy shit. But unfortunately, it's only people like me, right? And people probably watching Ian Scotto Rocks that are really loving this material. So, hey, kudos to Big Jay Oakerson for bringing up this topic and giving me something to ponder here on Ian Scotto Rocks. If you're a fan of the channel, you could leave us a super thanks, and we would greatly appreciate it. You could do that below, and you could also check out in the description the merch. My logo is based off the Motley Records logo that you may remember, And yeah, we have high quality t-shirts and this mug available to purchase. So if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Be sure to like the video so more people could see it. And if you want to binge watch some more stuff right here on Ian Scotto Rocks, we do deep dives. We do rock news and also commentary like this. So click right here and you can watch some more content. Keep it right here to Ian Scotto Rocks.